Number 10. The deepest warship in the world. In June 2022, the American explorer Victor Vescovo and his team found the wreck of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a warship that was last seen in October 1944, 78 years ago. But that wasn't what made the destroyer-class ship's discovery so unique. The vessel, nicknamed Sammy B, was found 22,916 feet below the sea in the Philippines. To put this into perspective, that's over 4 miles under the ocean's waves, probably longer than you'd need to travel to get to a grocery store. This makes it the deepest shipwreck that's ever been discovered. Sammy B sits on the seabed broken in two. Despite this, the ship is in good shape, with many of its features like its torpedo tubes and pilot house remaining easily recognizable from the imagery Vescovo and his crew found. The vessel ended up in its watery grave after the Battle of Samar, where U.S. naval forces took on the Japanese in the Philippine Sea. Sammy B was able to take down one Japanese destroyer and badly damage another, but at that point it didn't have much firepower left. Eventually, the lead ship of the enemy fleet, the Yamato, dealt the final blow, sinking the U.S. destroyer and claiming the lives of 89 of its 224 crew members. Number 9. The armored car in the sand. The small island of Vlieland lies north off the coast of the Netherlands. It's so tiny that there's just one town on it. But that's not the only thing you can find here. Cars are banned on Vlieland, but there's one exception. On the sandy dunes is the Cornfield Aircraft Gun Range used by NATO, and placed there is an M113 C&V armored car. The vehicle won't be going anywhere soon since its gray frame is littered with bullet holes from an ANGAU 830mm Avenger. This 7-barrel Gatling gun is most often used on A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft, which typically use the APC as target practice. When the M113 was functional, it was used as a patrol vehicle. Commonly used by Canadian, US, and Dutch forces during the 1960s, the armored car was a deterrent during the Cold War. As time passed, the M113 grew less useful to the Dutch military and was replaced with newer alternatives. Some of the vehicles were sold on to other countries to continue their service, but this particular vehicle on Vlieland has a unique way of helping its country's forces stay on their toes. Number 8. The rare Martin Baltimore bomber. The Martin Baltimore bomber was a fighter plane used by the British Royal Air Force during World War II. With twin engines, only pieces of this US-built aircraft remain from this war machine. Well, at least until 2016, when an underwater drone captured footage off of the coast of Italy's Linosa Island, showing an intact Martin Baltimore bomber laying underwater. The only known one in existence that's complete. Even though this was an amazing find, it took until 2022 for the wreckage to be confirmed as a piece of aeronautical history, when an Italian diver named Fabio Portella saw it in the flesh. Inspired by the find, Fabio kept digging to find more information about the plane. From looking through military records and in-person accounts from old fishermen, he found out that the bomber crashed in June 1942. Despite the cause most likely being that the airplane was shot down on its way to Malta, there were still survivors, as accounts from the elderly residents of Linosa revealed that people had been rescued from the wreckage. Of the 4 crew members, one named Alec Greaves sadly died in the crash, while the others, William Fincham, Robert Purslow, and Francis Baum, ended up in POW camps. Fincham and Baum managed to survive their experience, but sadly Purslow passed away after a cholera outbreak. Do you think there could be more fighter planes like this at the bottom of the ocean? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 7. The Schwere Gustav Railway Gun. As far as war machines go, you can't get much bigger than Schwere Gustav. This rail-mounted gun was made as the German response to the Maginot Line, which defended France in the 1930s as a combination of bunkers, railway lines, and fortifications designed to keep invaders at bay. To get past such an ironclad defense, the Nazi regime came up with the Schwere Gustav. With a gun barrel measuring over 100 feet, towering 4 stories tall, and weighing in at over 1,300 tons, it was truly a feat of engineering. That's just talking about the gun itself. Its ammunition was equally impressive. Each shell was as tall as 2 people and weighed over 20,000 pounds. As you could expect, this gave the Schwere Gustav some serious firepower. Although the gun wasn't ready by the time Hitler wanted to invade France, Schwere Gustav was actually used during World War II in the siege of Sevastopol in Russia in June 1942. Over 5 days, it only fired 48 rounds, but it took a team of over 500 men to keep it running. After this time, the massive gun was at its limit. Realizing how costly it was, the German army decided to shelve the giant weapon and remove it from the front lines. Schwere Gustav would then go unseen until its remains were found discarded in a forest on April 22, 1945 in eastern Germany, after it was believed that the weapon was destroyed by the German forces to stop it from falling into their enemies' hands. Number 6. The U.S. Amphibious Tank in an English Field. A farmer's field is usually somewhere you'd expect to see crops or animals grazing. But one field in Lincolnshire, England was home to a massive 18-ton amphibious tank. The tank was buried underground and had been there for 74 years. Built to serve in World War II, the US-made Buffalo LVT measured over 26 feet long. It's believed the craft that was found was used to help forces cross the Rhine and Elbe rivers in 1945, strategic points that were vital in helping turn the tide of the war. But how did this huge metal machine end up 30 feet below ground in a random English field? It wasn't destroyed in the war. It and other Buffalo craft were still standing. In 1947, floods swept across the country of Lincolnshire, so this tank and 11 others were sent to the town of Crowland to help build flood defenses. Sadly, though, the floods were so intense that the Buffalo LVT was swept away in the water along with 5 of its fellow vessels. The tank was eventually uncovered by a group of volunteers known as the Crowland Buffalo LVT Association after a 5-day excavation. The craft is in excellent condition despite having been underground for all this time, partly thanks to local soil with its mix of peat and clay helping to preserve it. It's hoped now that the Buffalo LVT can serve as a memorial to those catastrophic floods from decades ago. Number 5. The Roman siege engines of Jerusalem. During Emperor Nero's reign, Rome and Judea, a region that's now part of modern-day Israel, were at war. The conflict started in 66 AD after tension between the governing Roman Empire and the native Jewish population reached a burning point. Nero requested the help of a top general, Vespasian, and his son Titus to help restore order after the Roman governing body left Jerusalem a year earlier. Vespasian and Titus swept through the country on their way to Judea, retaking locations as they went. After a months-long journey, they ended up at the border of Jerusalem, ready to take back control of the pivotal city. A siege that would last over 4 months began, with Roman forces using ancient siege engines to slowly wear down Jerusalem. The most popular war machine used was the ballista, a wooden structure that worked like a cannon, firing ammunition like boulders and specially made bolts across large distances with massive destructive powers for its time. The ballista and other siege weapons used by the Romans during this attack were so powerful that there was hardly any of Jerusalem left standing by the end of the conflict. Although it was made of wood, archaeologists have not been able to find the ballistae themselves, but they found out where they would have been. Kafir Arbiv and his team discovered examples of the stone ammunition and rocks used where they were placed. After almost 200 years, we now know many of them were deployed around Cat Square, which is located in the center of modern-day Jerusalem. Number 4. The USS Grayback. In 2019, after 75 years of laying below the sea, the American submarine, the USS Grayback, was finally spotted. The Grayback was celebrated as one of the best submarines in the U.S. fleet, sinking over a dozen Japanese vessels in its time. But on its 10th patrol during World War II, it never returned from Pearl Harbor in January 1944. Due back in early March, by the end of the month, the USS Grayback was marked MIA. There was an attempt by the U.S. Navy to locate many vessels it had lost by putting together locations of where they were last seen. Although they had a location for the Grayback, why wasn't it there? The answer comes down to a simple error. When recording the latitude and longitude of the submarine's location, they were off by a single digit. Tim Taylor of the Lost 52 Project, which aims to find as many as 52 lost U.S. submarines from World War II, got in touch with Japanese researcher Yutaka Iwasaki and asked him to look at the old records that were used to determine the location. Using these reports, Iwasaki found one of interest from February 27, 1944. The radio transcript of the report said that a submarine had been hit by a Japanese Nakajima B-5N bomber, exploding and sinking it rapidly with no survivors reported. Acting on this information, Taylor and his team set out to the spot, and using an underwater drone, they found the Grayback over 100 miles away from the original reported latitude and longitude. Not only is this an amazing World War II discovery, it also provides closure to the families of those 80 men who perished on board. Number 3. The F35 Fighter Jet. In November 2021, one of the most impressive modern-day war machines sunk to a watery grave. Stationed on the British naval aircraft carrier the HMS Queen Elizabeth, an F-35 fighter jet was about to take off on a routine flying operation. But the plane couldn't get airborne and plummeted off the end of the flight deck into the waters below. Thankfully, the pilot survived and was able to eject safely from the vehicle before it fell. But this meant that over $120 million of military aircraft and technology had sunk to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Worried that this state-of-the-art machine could end up in enemy hands, a joint effort was mounted between the British, American, and Italian militaries to find the F-35 as soon as possible. Amazingly, after a week of working in secret to recover the aircraft, they found it almost a mile underwater and brought it back to the surface. It's unknown what exactly caused the F-35 jet to crash, but officials believe it could have been due to a piece of plastic sheeting that was sucked into the engine. Either way, it remains an impressive effort from all involved to find it so quickly and at such a depth. Number 2. The World War I cannon in Canada. World War I took place across most of Europe with battlefields in France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. But builders over 4,000 miles away in Ontario, Canada in 2021 found a war machine that had been used during the conflict. Construction workers in Amherstburg were demolishing an old baseball field so a school could be built on the site. As they started to turn the ground over and get rid of debris, imagine their surprise when a large Feld Canon 96 started to emerge from the dirt. But how did it end up under a baseball field in Canada? It's believed that the cannon came from a Canadian military victory at Cambrai in 1918, a location 3,935 miles away from where the weapon ended up. It was then taken back to Ontario, where it was placed at a cenotaph that was erected at this site in 1922. As the years went on and the nearby school needed more space, the cenotaph and a lot of the artifacts were moved, but the Feld Canon 96 was left behind since it was too damaged to be of any use as a display item. Interest is now being taken in this lost piece of history, though, due to the fact that the breech block underneath is still in one piece. Normally, this would be damaged by German forces to stop it from being used by the enemy. It's hoped that the cannon can be restored to its former glory soon. Number 1. The hydrogen bombs of Palomares. On January 17, 1966, a deadly crash took place and led to 4 hydrogen bombs dropping from the skies onto the Mediterranean coastline. A B-52G flew out from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, bearing 4 Type B-28R1 hydrogen bombs during Operation Chrome Dome, a typical Cold War airborne alert exercise. While refueling, the B-52 managed to hit the K-135 tanker over 31,000 feet in the air above the Spanish coast. The K-135 tanker exploded instantly when the fuel it was carrying ignited, leaving no survivors. The B-52 was a bit luckier. It fractured into pieces, with only 3 of the 7 crew members losing their lives. The deadly cargo of the B-52 was lost, leading to a frantic search to find the hydrogen bombs. 3 were located on the mainland near Palomares, a tiny fishing community in Almera, Spain. Although 1 was intact, 2 of them had partially detonated, contaminating almost a square-mile area with plutonium. But where was the 4th bomb? Despite a thorough search, the only part found was the parachute's tailplate, causing investigators to believe the bomb's chute had been released and carried out to sea by the wind. This then led to a frantic search effort by the U.S. Air Force, keen to make sure that they found the bomb before it could cause considerable damage. A local fisherman, Francisco Simo Orts, reported that he had seen the bomb fall into the sea, and this account helped the U.S. in its efforts. Francisco would even later be called Bomb Frankie. 80 days after the crash, the bomb was finally found, although the recovery mission was far from easy. On the first attempt to drag the missile back up to the surface from the Rio Almanzora Canyon, 2,550 feet below sea level, the rescue crew dropped, leading to it sinking further into the depths. Eventually, on April 7, 1966, the bomb was brought to the surface, but not before it reached a depth of 2,900 feet and tangled up one of the recovery vehicles in the process with its parachute cables. Thankfully, the bomb had not broken or detonated and was taken safely back to the USA. Thanks for watching. Which one of these war machines surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.